From the family grocery hauler to fire-breathing racing engines, the one name you need to know is USA Motor and Machine, located at 51 Cleveland Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. Give them a call at 615-726-3725 or at usamotorandmachine.com. Jeff Meeks and Chris Austin invite you to watch your favorite sports event at the Batter's Box at 43 Hermitage Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. The Batter's Box offers shuttle service to all Titans home games. It's a great place for friends to gather for the game and after the game. So check out the Batter's Box Bar and Grill, and thanks again for sponsoring the show.
Well, the celebration in Las Vegas is over. Brad Keselowski is indeed crowned the champion. Down in Pensacola, Florida, there's a 15-year-old kid who just won the biggest short track race in the country. And we got a special guest today who has been a car owner, a promoter, maybe an unhappy landowner. We'll cover all that. Larry Woody and I will be visiting with Nashville racing legend Gary Baker. All that speeding up next on Pit Pass.
Today's show is brought to you by locally owned and operated Highland Rim Speedway. Highland Rim Speedway is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year with great short track door-to-door stock car racing in a safe, family-friendly atmosphere. Visit their website at highlandrim.com. Bandwidth for today's show is brought to you by SoftLayer.com. We love SoftLayer here at Talkapolis. They are the greatest hosting company ever. They make everything easy. Check out their website at SoftLayer.com. Thanks again for sponsoring the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome in to Pit Pass. I'm Joe Williams, along with Larry Woody and our special guest, Gary Baker. We start, gentlemen, talking about the biggest short track race in the country, only it's not the All-American 400 in Nashville. It's the Snowball Derby at Pensacola, Florida, where a 15-year-old kid from Michigan kind of took Larry's favorite driver, Kyle Busch, to school in the last few laps. Our Terrell Davis was in Pensacola and brought us some pictures of what went on down there this weekend. Here you see the snowflake race, the previous event on Saturday night. Joseph Meyer out of Mount Juliet trying to get buckled in. Joseph qualified, made the race 23rd, had some trouble, wound up finishing 25th. Who won that race? Well, that's Chase Elliott. Yeah, you see the guy on the right, you may remember him. His name is Bill Elliott. That's his son, who's now out there winning races. Clay Alexander started in the 19th spot, finished 18th in the big race on Sunday. Young son of Mike Alexander out of Franklin, and he had a pretty good race, all things considered. Here's the start of the 45th annual Snowball in Pensacola. Now, if you haven't been there in a while, yeah, they've really added some grandstands. Kyle Busch wound up finishing third after the young man, Eric Jones, took him literally to school. As he's getting out of the car, can you imagine what it must feel like to be 15 years old and win the Snowball Derby in your first attempt? Unbelievable. Larry, you see him talking to Kurt Busch here. You can only imagine what that's going to feel like to beat Rowdy and win the Snowball Derby.
At age 15, Gary Baker and I have socks older than that. But, Gary, when you see that, it's got to make you think about the good old days at the fairgrounds when you ran that track out there, and you look at those big packed grandstands in Pensacola, and you say, man, we used to draw 3 times that many at the fairgrounds.
Well, exactly.
Not to bring back any bad memories, but
those were actually good memories. But looking at the track at the time and seeing some of the steel pictures, and I think some of those pictures even came from Terrell. Yeah. But when you see pictures of 18 and 22,000 people in the stands for just some of the Saturday night 200 lappers that we would have and stuff, it was awesome, and it was a good feeling, and it sort of told you how much of a racing town Middle Tennessee is.
And Gary, another segue, you know, a lot of people, including me, I'd wondered if local racing is dead over the in recent years, and you see what they did at Pensacola, why couldn't we have done that in Nashville? Well, with the fairgrounds.
If it had been a perfect storm in a positive way, we could have, because it was there. There is no facility, short track facility at least, in the country that has the potential that Nashville at the Fairground Speedway had at the time. It still could today from that standpoint, but it takes everybody pulling together, and back then we had a lot of people in positions of authority from a governmental standpoint, let's say, that weren't exactly on the same page with the people who wanted to see racing, the sport of automobile racing, thrive in Nashville.
I covered a lot of those fair board meetings, Gary, when you were running the track, and I always said, people say, what's wrong with those people, the fair board people? And I say, well, they're not bad people, they just don't know anything about racing. And I know how frustrating it was for you to explain what was going on. I remember, Gary, one time we were out there talking about a cup race coming up, and one of the fair board people asked, what's a cup race?
What's a cup race?
So I knew then, I shared your frustrations, but is there any chance for it to succeed, or is it, again, I don't think it'll ever go back to the way it was when you were running it. Joe Williams was the announcer. I was up in the press box eating your free food and typing out my little stories. Those days are gone, but can it survive on some level anymore?
Well, certainly it could. If all parties came together with one accord in one room and everybody's head was together, could it? Absolutely yes. But it takes everybody from the head of the government involved, and I mean, we would have to have, frankly, right now we'd have to have a governor and a mayor that are both on board with it. It has to start there, and then their administrative arms on down the line would have to get on board as well.
Because the bottom line, it's a city-owned facility, and anything that you do, you being a promoter owner, you've got to work your way through the city administration to get anything done.
Well, exactly, and if you have a favorable city situation, it could, back in the days at the time at Richmond, it worked out pretty well there, a similar type.
And it being a city-owned track in a kind of a landlocked area.
It was. And so it can work favorably, but it can also work unfavorably if all the parties do not have their heads together, and in our case it was not to be. There are all kinds of ways that it could be integrated today into a new development out there. If you start talking about an R&D type facility, we look around. The South is becoming an automotive hotbed of manufacturing. I've talked to some of these companies. Some of them, they talk about, well, our only R&D track right now is 840, and that's getting to be a little problematic. And they said, yeah, we'd love to have a track that if we had a research facility, and I'm not talking about each one of them building a $50 million facility, but each one of them having, in effect, their own little R&D outlet facility there.
As you said so many times, you can do more with a racetrack than race on it.
Exactly, and there are examples around the country where that's the case. And I was talking to the director of racing at Nissan, and he fired off about 12 to 14 companies right here located in Middle Tennessee that would love, and it can be something as small as radiator testing. Well, okay, put that new design radiator in that car and go out and start turning laps around the track.
Testing, things like that.
As opposed to going out to 840 and saying, well, we've got to run 118 miles an hour on 840. Shock testing, you name it, on down the list, all kinds of things that could be done with it. And he was talking about how, he saw that it could really be a developable concept.
Folks, if you weren't ready for this, you better be. Let's get this officially done, because you got three guys sitting here. One, I'm awfully honored to have literally idols on both sides of me. Larry, Woody, this is Gary Baker. Most of you probably already know Gary. Gary, of course, the former leaseholder at the fairgrounds, owned Bristol. He's owned race teams. He's done his own driving. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about the 24 hours of Daytona. That goes back a little bit, but he's done his own driving. Now, having said that, you can tell I've already lost control of this thing. And that's okay, because we're going to have a lot of fun just sitting back, listening, and going where these guys are going to go, because there is such a wealth of information sitting right here on both sides of me. I hope to just kind of sit back. And Larry, I think Gary, I think you've already answered my first question. That was, do you miss the racetrack? And I think a resounding yes is there.
Well, yes. Do I miss the racetrack? Do I miss Bristol still? Yes. Do I miss Nashville still? Yes. Do I just cringe sometimes when the thought occurs to me what could have been here in Nashville, how close we were, how much there was so much support for a new facility here in Nashville, and we were on the verge. And then all of a sudden it just got taken right out from under us.
And Gary, I remember you said at the time when you operated a track, we in Nashville had 2 cup races, and you lobbied hard to save at least one of them, and you felt if you could get some cooperation from the Fair Board, the city in general, you could have saved for Nashville at least 1 cup race with some expansion and improvements and so forth, and we Nashville would have at least 1 cup race today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Would it today? Would that be the biggest sporting event in the city of Nashville? Absolutely.
It would dwarf the Titans.
Well, it would. One weekend would be more than, as far as economic impact, than the whole season of the Titans.
Exactly.
And again, research has proven that over and over again. Even I can talk about direct conversations with the governor of the state of Georgia when he came down to his people, his economic people, not some independent outside source hired by the racetrack or something. But no, his own economic people talked about one race at Atlanta being a bigger economic impact to the environment of Atlanta than 4, not NFL games, 4 Super Bowls.
Right.
And when he saw that, he said, okay, it's time for the state to start putting some money in here. And if you look at the new ingress, egress, quote, interstate highway connecting the track to there, that is a direct result of the governor's study of the economic impact.
I remember when you were talking about that, Gary, and you said at the time that the Atlanta Raceway was worth more to the state economically than the entire Falcon schedule, the Hawks schedule, and the hockey team at the time combined. Because, of course, race fans, a lot of them come from out of town. They stay in hotel rooms, restaurants, bars. Not me, but some people stay in bars, and they spend a lot of money. Whereas most of your NFL fans, they come from that area for home games, and they don't stay in hotels and restaurants and bars and go out to activities. They drive in from Murfreesboro, Galveston, or wherever the day of the game, go to the game, and then go back to Murfreesboro
area. And there's also 20 games going on that particular weekend. Whereas at Cup, there is one NASCAR race that weekend, and people are averaging 300 to 400 miles in travel. So
that's what's so
new
frustrating.
Tourism money brought and dropped in, as opposed to churning local dollars.
Yeah, and Joe and I have talked about this. That's what's so frustrating as a taxpayer in Davidson County or in Tennessee, anywhere, Middle Tennessee, is the loss of all that economic potential. You don't have to be a racing fan to mourn the loss of the cup race. It's just when your property tax arrives in the mail, you ought to go out and whine a little.
It would be so huge to Middle Tennessee when you think about that many people bringing that much money and hanging in here for 3 to 4 days and spending that money. So yes, huge to Tennessee, but equally, it would have been huge to NASCAR. Today, would this be one of the? No, it would be the major event. Would it rival Daytona and Charlotte as the major event of the year? Yes, by today it would have. After all, we're Music City, we're tourists, we're more centrally located, easier access travel. It would not in the least surprise me if we were dealing with 250 to 300,000 people today at that facility, and that would be huge to NASCAR.
I remember, Gary, your great line was at the time when this stuff was on the brink, save it or lose it. You said Nashville could be Daytona without the beach because of all the country music entertainment venues
well, absolutely could, but you know what? I wasn't the only one that saw that. Sitting there talking in Bill France Jr.'s office, and he made the direct, plain Jane statement. You can't be any more unequivocal than he was. If he had a map of the United States of America and he was designing where they were going to place racetracks, the first city, I'm talking about a clean sheet of paper here, the first city he would drop a racetrack in would be Nashville, Tennessee. That was Bill France Jr.'s statement, and he didn't say it because he was trying to blow smoke. He said it because he meant it. It was that important to him that they would have loved to have had one here in Nashville.
And it's such a good sports marketing area. As you know, Joe, you spent your career in marketing. Man, this is such a plum when it comes to sports marketing and anything. Of course, Gary spent most of his career in marketing too, brought some of the biggest sponsors in NASCAR into the sport. So, from an economic standpoint, you're right, Gary, and NASCAR would just drool over the prospect of coming back in here. So why don't they?
I got to say, Gary, if Bill France Jr. saw that, believed that, yet sat on it and never did anything with it, what was the fear? And let's just get down to brass tacks. Was the fear of local government / Fair Board that great in NASCAR's mind?
Well, it depends on the time frame that we're talking about. At one point in time, the answer to your question is unequivocally yes. I was in their NASCAR's attorney's offices in Washington. I saw the file that they had on our fair board. They had a file on our fair board, and the conclusory summary statement of that was they didn't like what they saw.
Unpredictable. NASCAR doesn't like the unknown.
Actually, I think they were pretty predictable.
That was the sad part. There was some of both. Yes, NASCAR wants to know with whom they're dealing. They want to be able to pick up the phone and call that person, and that is the owner, that is the president, that is the whatever. And with the existing lease that we had, there was a 30-year lease, and that thing was pretty ironclad. We were in good shape until that lease expired, and then that was when, of course, the fair board felt like, okay, now we're going to get more control over this situation, and that was the end of it.
Gary, I've told this story many times as an example of why we don't have cup racing, and people think I exaggerate, but I remember one fair board meeting I covered, and again, this is back in around 83, 84 when the races are in balance, and the meeting deteriorated into a squabble over who was going to patch a leak in the roof. The tar had cracked, and some of the track and the fair board shared office space out there, and the roof was leaking, and with the cup races on the line, the fair board meeting turned into a squabble over who's responsible for patching a leaky roof.
And as well as I remember that meeting, I had gone in there with a grandiose plan about splitting revenues and all this and some new events and activities we were going to bring to the fairgrounds for the good of the entire economy again. It would have put money in the track's pocket, it would have put money in the fair board's pocket, it would have put money in Nashville's economy. But we started talking about patching the roof.
At one point, I think Gary actually volunteered to get some tar, climb up, and patch the darn roof himself.
So we can get on the report.
But it was so frustrating. Again, as a reporter, I could sense the frustration in the room, and I know it had to be 100 times that much for you when you're sitting there trying to get this thing off the ground, and they're just, quibbling over nothing.
Director's quibbling over taking a break. We've run over a little bit, but you know what? That's okay. Conversation's been good. We're going to take our first time out. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Gary Baker and Larry Woody as we say, yep, there's another racetrack in town too, just up the road at Highland Rim, just off the Bethel Road exit. They'll be starting up again in the spring, and we'll bring you more details on that. We'll even talk to Gary about Highland Rim. There's been a lot of times when the tracks have worked together, and sometimes they didn't. That's the story for our next segment. Stay with us. We'll be back on Pit Pass.
From the family grocery hauler to fire-breathing racing engines, the one name you need to know is USA Motor and Machine, located at 51 Cleveland Avenue in Nashville, Tennessee. Give them a call at 615-726-3725 or at usamotorandmachine.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to this edition of Pit Pass. Joe Williams, Larry Woody, and Nashville legend Gary Baker on my left. Gary, we've talked a little bit about your involvement at the fairgrounds. Now, you've got, there was a 30-year contract that Bill Donahoe originally put together, I guess in '57. You and some of your partners came in '78, '79 and purchased however that came about. Did you know what you were getting into? Did you realize then what you were doing when you got involved with that contract?
No clue. I was just 1/3 at the time, and it was Lanny Hester and Clarence Edmonds, the other two. And I was sort of going to just be along for the ride, I thought. Then whatever, a couple of years later, both of those guys are gone as partners at both Bristol and Nashville. Of course, it was only Lanny at Bristol. But all of a sudden now you're 100% of both of them. So whatever I was getting into, I got into it.
We used to say you drew straws and you lost. You got the track, Gary.
There were days, most days, I think I would agree with you. And about 4 in the morning after those cup races, I would have probably agreed with you. But
I'm
a
kidding.
whole lot more
Those
satisfaction.
those are great days. Those are the best days at the fairgrounds because you came in.
Fun.
Mr. Donahoe, Bill Donahoe, did a good job taking the sport to a certain level. But then his era had kind of passed, and I thought you took over kind of like Darrell Waltrip coming into NASCAR. Gary Baker took over the time to grow the sport, marketing, sponsorships, that kind of thing. And I thought those were the glory days at the fairgrounds. And also at Bristol, Joe. Of course, a lot of people don't know Gary Baker lit Bristol. He said, "This guy's crazy. He's putting lights up at Bristol." Then you look around, they got 160,000 seats and a waiting list. So Gary did a few things right as a track owner, I'd say.
Now, as you progress through your last couple of years, maybe, I'd say 85, 86, 87, maybe the greatest days for local racing. Several reasons for that. And just things just kind of fell into place those last 3 years. Now, obviously, it's had a downturn. It has been said there are only 3 people who can return weekly racing to the prominence that it had once here in Nashville. 2 are dead, and 1's not interested under the current circumstance. Now, Bill Donahoe and Bob Harmon are dead. That leaves you. Is that, people make that comment, what's it make you think?
First of all, he's glad he's not dead.
Well, yeah.
I'm glad I'm not, but I'm headed in that direction.
That's the first point.
Maybe too old to take on that kind of challenge again. But in some ways, it's a different day and a different time. It would encompass a whole lot of reforming the band, if you will. That and I said governor, mayor, and all the way down. It would have to be the kind of deal where you had governmental support. Since now, much of the control of the track is in their hands, as opposed to what it was in 85, 86, and 87. But it's also a different day as far as weekly is concerned. If you remember, and Woodrow, you'd have to confirm this, but I think back in 87, I remember our 200-lapper late model races, we would have as many as 5, and I think one time we had 7, if not 8, cup drivers in our local cars.
Yeah.
Well, back then you could pick up the phone and call these guys. They were good buddies, and you call them, and Bobby Allison, I'll come on up. Tim Richmond, I'll be there.
Darrell would walk barefoot to get here, Darrell Waltrip.
And we would have fun. Our guys are racing against the biggest names in the sport, and people are begging you to take their money to find a seat. And I remember even having the police cordon off some of the quarter-mile track and selling standing room onlys down there. And I think we put like 4,000 people standing room only in the infield after the fire marshal was having a hissy fit about too many people in the grandstands. That was the night I think we got to something like 24,000. I don't know. I'd have to check with Terrell on that.
22,501.
22,500. I'll take your word for it. But it was just how many more seats can we build? Actually, I wanted to build seats, but when you've got 3 years left or 1 year left then on the lease, what do? Well, you get a new lease, and then you start pouring money into the place, which people would be willing to do if the right lease structure was put on the table. Without the right lease structure put on the table by the entities of government that own and control the facility, it'll never happen.
Gary, even though you're out as a track operator now, you and Mike Curb ventured into the Nationwide Series 3 or 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and I thought, first of all, you said we may be coming in a difficult time because of the sponsorships, the economy, and so forth. Kind of give the listeners, Gary, an update on where Baker Curb Racing is now and kind of some of the things that you've gone through trying to keep this team afloat the last few years.
Well, this is the time to get out the crying towel, I guess, because you're talking about one of maybe the biggest disappointments of all in racing. That probably is going to be it. And let me explain what I mean there. That team, we put it together basically from scratch. We had bought a team, Bruco, out of Kentucky, moved it here, and pretty well started from scratch because a lot of the guys didn't come. In no time, that bunch of guys that I'll just admit I can't talk about pride and all that, but when you talk about that bunch at Baker Curb, That bunch of guys, small pack of good old Tennessee boys, they started building cars, and we were building the cars right there in our facility here in Nashville. I will say, maybe publicly for the first time ever, about the third or fourth race of that 210 season, none other than Greg Biffle unstraps out of our car. I'm standing over there probably 25, 30 feet away. He walks straight over there to me and he says, Gary, I'm telling you, those are the best handling cars I have sit in 5 years. Now, Greg Biffle didn't have to say, I didn't even ask him. But when he's telling me that, he says those cars handle like nothing he's driven in years.
And almost came close to winning 2, if not 3 nationwide races.
Two or three of the first handful of races in 210, yeah, we were within inches, literally, leading both of them coming off turn 4. And one of them got a little love tap by the 18 car, and Bush got us by about less than 12 inches at the line. And the other one, as well as I remember, it was Keselowski in the 22 car. I told Penske he owed me one after that, but same thing coming off 4. But Greg there was no doubt in his mind. We were going to win races this year, and we're going to win a bunch of them. It's going to be multiple races. We're not actually to be lucky. We've got the best car. Well, at the time, were we the fastest forward? Yes, we were the fastest forward. Now, wait a minute. Whoa, what about Jack Roush and that organization that have budgets that are, in most cases, more than 3 times what our budget was? Yes, we had Red Man sponsorship, but we were running at about 1/3 the level of the Roush budgets on their car. But yet, Carl Edwards, defending national champion and all that, with 3 times the money in the car, could not run with that little old Baker curb car out of Nashville. About the 4th race in, one of his crew chiefs came over there, grabbed one of our guys sitting over there. Just, again, look up there on the board. We were the fastest forward. No, we were the fastest car on the track in happy hour. He comes over there. Who's building y'all's cars? Our guy said, well, we're building them. No. I mean, who's building your chassis? Our guy says, well, we build our chassis. Wait a minute, you're building those chassis in Nashville, Tennessee? You know, the concept is if it's not in Charlotte, it can't go fast. Well, our guys were building a better mousetrap. They were building, they had their own tweaks and all that on what they were putting in those chassis, and that's why our cars were so fast on the track. And that's why even with 1/3 the money, we were always the fastest forward, and more often than not, the fastest car on the track. So, yeah, it was inevitable that we were going to start winning races. Now, along comes April, and our president signed an executive order that as of June 23rd, Red Man could no longer be a sponsor on that car. Now, you're talking about trouble. There we are. We've got a year's budgeted set of expenses. You're looking at about $4 million worth of outlay. And as of June 23rd, not even halfway through the year, your income just got zeroed.
Your sponsor can't sponsor any longer.
They're outlawed. They cannot be on the car anymore.
Not because they don't want to. They literally can't by law.
He outlawed them as of June 23rd. So it really took a team that was getting ready to start winning races. And I think, guys, if you look around the state of Tennessee, how much sponsorship money is in this state that right now is still headed toward North Carolina. Okay, I mean, go down the list. The Dollar Generals, the FedExes, the Little Debbie's, the Pilot Oil, even, Hunt Brothers Pizza and all that. Right here in Tennessee, those sponsored dollars create extremely highly paying jobs. You're talking engineers. I mean, race teams are highly paid guys, let's face it. Those jobs could be right here in Nashville. And some of those companies, headquarters, a rock's throw from our race shop. It just makes sense, especially when you put into the equation Not only the fact that we're going over there and beating all those teams that they're sending their money to, we're faster, we're here in Nashville, but on top of that, yeah, we've got the marketing expertise that we can do what you want to be done, what you want done off the track as far as moving your product.
Gary, is it simply a matter of sponsors are reluctant to put the kind of money in that you need today in a second-tier series like Nationwide? Because, as we said, nobody knows more about sponsorships and marketing than Gary Baker. You brought some of the, like Procter & Gamble, people like that in the sport. You know how to get sponsors, and as you say, there's a lot of them here in the area, but you just hadn't been able to land one for your team. And is it that simple? With the economy the way it is, they just shy away from a so-called second division series as Nationwide is, or what is the problem? Why won't they?
That is one of the factors. That is one of the factors. So again, it's investment and return on investment. If it's structured right, a sponsorship on a Nationwide car can be, it can be the best dollar invested in NASCAR sponsorship. Has NASCAR done it any favors lately? No. NASCAR, the Nationwide Series could be much bigger than it is. NASCAR has made some blunderous moves relative to Nationwide, and it's hurt the series some. There is no question it has hurt the series. But still, can that be sold as an effective sponsorship tool? The answer is yes, but there are a lot of factors saying, well, there are those that think, well, I got to be Cup to get the, well, it's the old little fish in big pond theory versus the overwhelming fish in a little pond.
And that's kind of where I was going to head with the next question, Gary. How much of this is what I call sponsor poaching? You show up at the racetrack with a Nationwide car and a new sponsor on Saturday. On Monday, the Cup team poachers are already on the telephone explaining how it's better to have a little patch on this uniform than the whole car on this in this series.
True story, Joe. Back in back when Brad was driving our car, before Baker Curb.
Your son, Brad.
Son, Brad, yeah. He was driving our car, the number 28 car. We showed up at the track with a national sponsor on that car, and I explained to the guys, well, they had told me here's their marketing program they want to accomplish as far as this year is concerned. I was fine, and you're only going to do whatever, it was 8 races or something that year. We can accomplish your goals. I told them, when you show up at the track this weekend on this car, here are the people you're going to get a phone call from next week. By mid-afternoon Monday, on Monday, the head of marketing in that company called and said, well, I don't know how you knew it, but 2 of them have already called. And it was one of the major, the major Cup teams. And you know what? The rest of the story, and I can repeat this story I don't know how many times, but the rest of the story, the goals that we wanted to accomplish, they wanted us to accomplish that year in their marketing. It involved some targeted customers and over 50 million of incremental sales. We accomplished it to the T. Everything they wanted got accomplished. But you know what? Exactly what you said. The enticement of that big multinational looking operation
with a big name driver behind the wheel.
Big name driver behind them and all that. They had to go. The following year they went. The following year they were out of racing. Total disappointment. Nothing worked the second year. They were lost in the shuffle, and they were out of racing.
Well, along that gloomy line, what is the status of Baker Curb racing now, Gary? I know earlier in the season we talked about it, and you said we've suspended operations, but that doesn't mean we've folded. We've still got the physical plant there. What is the update on the status of the team?
There's an update. That's all changed. Because, yes, for a while we were suspended, and the band was ready to come back together. I wanted to bring those. Baker Curb, it was all about the guys. That's all it boils down to. You don't care where the roof is. You don't care what equipment you have. It's all about the guys. They were ready to come back together, and we came within 4 days of having a major sponsor to bring the operation back into to fruition. But I'm afraid that sponsor within the last 3 or 4 days crashed and burned. As a result, there is no Baker Curve. The facility is now the production facility of the new ABC series Nashville. And we don't have a race shop there. Of course, now if the right sponsor comes along, we can have a race shop this time tomorrow.
I remember, Gary, when you and Mike Curb had your coming out party, and everybody's so enthusiastic, and Mike Hilton, NASCAR president, came in for it, and Jim Hunter, one of the NASCAR executives. I mean, you had the NASCAR hierarchy was there on hand for your coming out dinner that night to wish you well, and I thought, man, what an endorsement when Mike Hilton comes in for a startup team to give you a kind of a pat on the back and good luck, Gary and Mike. And I thought there's no way, given the expertise of Gary Baker and Mike Curb, I mean, you two guys have been, nobody in the country has more on-hands experience running race teams and sponsorships, that kind of the marketing end, than you and Mike. I didn't think there's any way it could go wrong, and for the first time in my career, Joe, I guess I was wrong. It's just, like we said before, Gary, maybe you got caught up in the perfect storm with the bad economy, the shifting landscape of the nationwide series. It seemed like anything that could go against you did go against you.
Well, it did, but yeah, I was equally wrong. I thought there was no way imaginable that this couldn't happen, and of course we were that close.
Yep.
And I think with Biffle in the car and getting ready to win the races we were going to win, had we not lost the Red Man sponsorship because of the stroke of the president's pen, I think we would probably be operating with a couple of Cup cars today.
That was my question at the time. How long, Gary, will it be before you move up into the Cup Series? You said, look, let us get our nationwide program on track first. Gary, I think we're running short on time. I think the listeners would want to know, what does the future hold for Gary Baker? You've been a major player in this sport for spanning 4 decades. Where do you go from now?
Depends on what happens when I wake up in the morning. If the right opportunity came along, yes, would be back in it, but it would have to be a situation where the team was fully funded up front, as opposed to this on the come like we were. I would love to put those guys back together and go finish what we had started. And that's the sentiment I hear from those guys as well. They want to finish what we started. I'm talking about crew chief on the way down. All the guys want to finish our business, and our business was to start winning races. But it would have to be that sponsorship that is in place up front. We were so close, I thought, with some of these major Tennessee companies, but all that Tennessee money is still going to Carolina right now, and I hate to see it.
But the great thing about this sport, and you guys have been in as long as I have, there's always tomorrow. I mean, you've got a lot more losers and winners in racing, and you just pick yourself up, and like I say, the sun comes up in the morning, and you never say never. So, Joe, I'm not sure we've seen the last of Gary Baker in the racing circles.
I don't think so. We haven't seen the last of him in the show. We've got one more segment to go. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about super speedways, one that may be there, one that, man, if it had made it, that's a whole other story you may not know about.
And Gary has the inside story on all this.
Yes, he does. And we'll also play a little word association with Gary. Just throw some names out there and get some opinions. This is going to be fun, almost as much fun as going and seeing the guys at USA Motor and Machine when something goes bad. Look, if you need work just on your daily driver all the way up to your race car, that's never fun. You never think about it as fun. You go over to USA Motor and Machine on Cleveland, and they can make it as painless as possible. And knowing those guys, you'll get a laugh out of somebody before it's done. That's just the way they try to do things to keep you comfortable. It's USA Motor and Machine. We'll be back. Final segment on Pit Pass coming up next.
Today's show is brought to you by locally owned and operated Highland Rim Speedway. Highland Rim Speedway is celebrating its 50th anniversary this year with great short-track, door-to-door stock car racing in a safe, family-friendly atmosphere. Visit their website at highlandrim.com.
And welcome back, everybody. The final segment of Pit Pass today with Larry Woody. and Nashville legend Gary Baker. And he's still gigging me for calling him a legend, but
well, in his own mind.
Well, actually, that's the fun part. I sit between two legends. I mean, this makes me feel good. The only problem is I wish I was smaller, so they wouldn't have to be so far apart. They could sit together and watch things. Maybe even fit in the booth at the batter's box over on Hermitage Avenue when they go over to watch a ball game or a race or something. Gary, let's talk a little bit about one of the everybody is aware of Nashville Super Speedway. Everybody, I won't say everybody, but over the course of years, there have been a lot of folks who've taken a shot at building a super speedway in Middle Tennessee. You are the one who came closest to pulling it off back in that 87, 88 area when you were able to accumulate a lot of land. And instead of becoming a super speedway, it became a pasture that made you the largest single taxpayer in the city of Franklin for about 8 or 9 years.
And wasn't that developed into what's now the Cool Springs area, Gary? You put a lot of that land together for a super speedway, and when it didn't happen, it's a shopping center now.
Well, all that's true. Back at the time, of course, everything was sort of behind closed doors, needless to say, when you're trying to assemble land for something like this. But we were looking at 2 sites, yes. One was in what is now Cool Springs. The interchange that is Cool Springs Boulevard was part of the plan. The track itself was going to sit on the east side between the interstate and the hills there. The Primus Ford Motor Company financial headquarters there is sitting real close to where turn 3 of the track was designed to go. In addition to that, we were looking at assemblage of Bells Bend. That was a conversation with the governor and with the mayor at the time. That was even more massive. It involved something like 3,000 acres, had the plans drawn with a marina in there, a major bridge connection over the river to I-40 to the south, to Briley Parkway to the east. Purchased the railroad authority that right now goes up to Ashland City. So you could bring the fans in by rail, by boat, by car, and of course plane across the bridge there. But how perfect that facility would have been. And that 3,000 acres of development at the time, Metro, remember the old squabble about the dump and all that, it had 600 acres. It would have made that land highly valuable to the government. So there were a lot of people that were believers in this, and we had a governor back there, McWhorter, who understood what this could be for the state of Tennessee. He wanted to see the Cup facility built here in Nashville. We were so close, it defies belief at that time. Of course, early on, when we had the 2 Cup dates, makes it pretty easy to build a Cup facility. And we had, this was right before Warner Hodgdon came into the picture. A client of mine happened to be a little entity called NLT, who at the time owned National Life, who at the time owned Grand Ole Opry, Opryland, and they were big believers in having a track built here for one simple reason. Look at what it does to the turnstiles at Opryland. Tourism. We talked about earlier. Tourism. They're coming in from Tumwater, Iowa, not from Lebanon, Tennessee. And all they've got to do is get them here a day or 2 earlier, and they're going to spin the turnstiles at Opryland. So yeah, we're all for this. At the time, you could do tax-exempt incremental financing. NLT being a client. The chairman of the board was a guy named Walter Robinson, who was also a client. Walter said, we just do it, whatever it takes. Okay, NLT finances it with tax-free bonds. We built a facility. It's a win-win for everybody, because if it's a win for Middle Tennessee, it's a win for NLT and what it would have done for Opryland and all that. So yeah, it was pretty much a go. And at the time, it was a matter of just which is the better locale to situate it in the Cool Springs area, which at the time was a bunch of cornfields and soybean fields.
Well, what happened?
Well, I made a mistake. I got a phone call from Warner Hodgdon. He wanted to buy half. And
a California real estate entrepreneur, San Bernardino. high roller.
I think the world of Warner. I did at the time. I do today, but it was a mistake. And after a year of nothing happening, and I'm saying, Warner, we've got to get on with getting this track built. I've got the land. Let's do it, or we can acquire the land, Bell's Bend. One or the other. Let's get on with it. All the dominoes are lined up. Everything is in place. And he was determined that Nashville do a, quote, Richmond deal, where instead of building the new super speedway, we just expand the facility there on the fairgrounds. Warner, it will not work. Number one, our fairgrounds is much smaller. Number two, we don't control the fairgrounds. And it's not a real favorable entity that does control the fairgrounds. Much too small, bad ingress, egress. If we're talking about 200,000 people, this is a joke. If you're talking about 100,000 people, it would be a joke. And we've got to think in terms of 200,000 plus. As I said before, we would be far plus of that today. But okay, we reached an impasse, and as much as I wanted to get on with, I had to get on with it. So I said, okay, Warner, I'll buy your half back because it's time to build it. But according to our contract, when I exercise that clause, he has to sell to me or he has to buy from me. He cannot just sit there and say, not interested.
And he bought.
Sadly, he bought. And that was the end of that.
Well, one track, and we've been through this before, basically you ended up with a partner that disagreed with the direction you wanted to go, and the whole thing kind of unraveled at that point. But meanwhile, Gary, Dover Motorsports came in and built a super speedway in Gladeville, Wilson County, and you said at the time, I talked to you about it, you said, well, I think it's a bad location, and a bad track design. As it turned out, you were right, because now it's suspended operations and sitting out there growing weeds. What is it that simple, Gary? What went wrong with the super speedway in Gladeville?
Well, the location you could make work. It would not have been my first choice. But is it an Achilles heel? By no means is the location the major trouble.
Not choice, but could have overcome it.
Exactly. The track design, I do have a problem with, and I even told one of the principals there at the time, in addition, I guess, to telling you, the old concept, and I think this has been proven over the events of recent months and in the last couple of years, you have to decide, are you building a stock car track, or are you building a Indy car track? Yeah. Indy cars on stock car tracks are dangerous, i.e. Weldon, Texas Motor Speedway. Yep. Too dangerous. Stock cars on IndyCar tracks, too boring. Yep. I'd rather watch gray paint dry. They don't work on those tracks, in my view. Yep. Now the problem is, it seems like a lot of fans vote for that view with their pocketbooks. I want to see stock cars on stock car tracks. The problem with the Nashville track, the only thing I saw, and there were minor things I would have done, but that's nitpicking stuff here or there. The major problem was, as a concept, it was sort of a compromise between the two. We'll design a track that works for stock cars and one that works for Indy cars.
Sort of a hybrid.
A hybrid, halfway in betweener, and ends up it doesn't work for either. Yeah. That track, properly configured, I think could be brought back from the grave and could be a viable track on the nationwide circuit.
We've talked about it, Gary. If Gary Baker took over the track, the first thing you'd do would be basically plow up the existing track and build a different track, a reconfigured track, more conducive to Bristol. That track did pretty well when Gary Baker was doing it.
And then they changed it. You see what happened? They had to change it back.
Well, Gary, you know it's for sale. Is there any chance that you might, now that you're just riding around your horses on your farm out in Williamson County, any chance you might be interested in checking out the price tag on the super speedway?
Well, Dennis McGlynn up there, and I've had some conversations.
Dennis being the CEO at Dover Motorsports.
We've had conversations, but the fact of the matter, I'm a little older now than I was then. And
no wiser though. You're still
wiser.
You did it in a heartbeat, Gary. I know you. Seriously, it's something that you haven't taken off the I guess, back burner. You said it's on the back burner, but at least it's on a burner, isn't it?
Well, yeah. If I'd have won that 500 million lottery last week, I might have taken off in that direction. But right now, it's not on the front burner, but it's not completely off the oven.
But the super speedway, Gary, you think it could be made viable again under the right management, and maybe even put some money in it, reconfiguration, that kind of thing? It's not a lost cause in your estimation.
No, it's not a lost cause. Not by no means is it a lost cause. When you look at the incredible power of the marketing potential of NASCAR racing, the fact that we do not have it here in Nashville, in Middle Tennessee, it's beyond sad. What it could do to the corporate environment here, it would just so greatly enhance our position in the national and international marketplace. It needs to be back on the NASCAR circuit, absolutely.
Quick question. Can you come back? Will you come back?
I would be
will
happy
you come
to
back and sit with us
as long as you guys are here. I just hope my throat is not in as bad a situation when I do.
We just scratched the surface.
Oh, I was gonna say,
we hadn't even gotten into some of those great old war stories about the good old days at the fairgrounds. I remember, Gary, one time when you were on the track, Joe was up in the booth calling a race, and before the start of one of the events, a litter of puppies comes crawling out of a culvert on the backstretch, and so they have to stop the race to get the puppies off the track, and Joe, dead dry voice says, "Ladies and gentlemen, we stopped proceedings due to litter on the track."
That's what it was.
And then went right on. Never skipped a beat. Litter on the track.
Had a little litter on the track. Got to get it picked up. Everything will be fine.
Stories like that. That's what I miss.
I like that. We've got to tell some of those stories, at least the ones that wouldn't have to be censored.
We could do a dozen stories just on Joe.
It's internet. We can we can get away with a lot more stuff here than we can elsewhere. You will come back though.
Oh yes,
we want to do some more. We have literally run out of time for once. This has been Pit Pass. Thank you to Gary Baker for being here. Larry, Woody, this has been a good one.
Great fun.
I'm looking forward to doing this again. I'm Joe Williams. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time right here on Pit Pass.